This episode has been brought to you in part by the Toronto Heschel School. You are invited to attend their open house on November 10th to discover what makes Heschel special. Visit torontoheschel.org for more details. That's Toronto, HESCHEL.org.
This is Bonjour Chai, the G'day Jewish Mite edition. I'm Avi Feingold in Montreal, and I'm here with Alana Zakon in Toronto and David Sklar in Calgary. We are your Frozen Chosen. On today's show, we will be talking about the ins and outs of organ donation. What is the Jewish approach? Where do we stand as a community in Canada? What we can all do with regards to organ donation. We'll talk to Robby Berman of the Halachic Organ Donor Society, as well as someone who is currently waiting for a kidney. But first, Alana, David, you both write professionally. What's your relationship to plagiarism?
I feel like I was a really good student in terms of, grades, sure, but I was a goody two-shoes, and I probably tried really hard not to plagiarize when I was younger and in high school.
I think the last thing I was ever accused of plagiarizing would have been like a grade 9 essay about Holden Caulfield. The teacher sat us all down and sort of said, I know some of you.
Did you Spark Notes?
No, I actually was honest. I did the work. I was a very diligent student like yourself.
Oh, so you got accused of it, but it was a false alarm.
I panicked. I said, "Oh my God, did I inadvertently plagiarize something? Did I hear something that someone else mentioned? Did my mom say something about Holden Caulfield?" And she stared us all down in Bialik and sort of said, "Someone's going to come forward right now and admit that they plagiarized their essay or else." And we all panicked, and I think I was like, I used the word platonic. I don't think I've ever said that word before. Maybe that was plagiarism. And I got really nervous, but
it's actually reminding me of the feeling of being a high school student, because when you had to write essays that were more factual, I remember trying to find all the synonyms so that I wouldn't be plagiarizing, because sometimes it's just the information is what it is and you don't want to take it and copy paste it from a book, but like that's what you have to write about, you know? What about you, Abby?
So we're talking about individual words here. So the reason why I brought it up is because there's an article that came out in the Australian Jewish News last week that told this bonkers story about a certain Rabbi Gersh Lazaro who was caught plagiarizing many of his sermons and published writings from other rabbis.
That's so wild.
Now, the Canadian hook here is that the one named rabbi that it stated in the article is my friend and colleague, Rabbi Eric Grossman, who is at the Akiva School here in Montreal. And apparently this guy was like, oh, you know what? Let's plagiarize from somebody halfway across the world because nobody will ever figure this out. Until they did, without thinking about the fact that the internet exists.
So,
right?
So how did they find out in the first place that this rabbi was plagiarizing from across the world? So
the article stated only that people started getting suspicious because he was using words like fall instead of what they use in Australia, which is autumn. And, you know, that there was other like words that weren't being, that didn't make sense. And then they started plugging this stuff in and started realizing that he was taking like episodes that were taking place in Central Park and he would just recast them as taking place in a park near him with his family and things like that. And then they pushed, you know, once somebody suspected something, the rest just, you know, unveiled it, unraveled, and everything just came out. Yeah.
To me, the most unethical part of this whole situation, and then they talk about this in the article, is that there were some personal anecdotes about real people and experiences that they had, and he just took the stories and then made up different names or used people in his own life.
Do you think he was just overworked and exhausted and needed something like within last minute, and he was just a procrastinator?
But all the time? Why are you a rabbi then?
Yeah, I mean, this
part of the job.
Avi, we need to know, have you ever plagiarized anything? Rabbi Avi?
So rabbis do not come up, here's a big secret. Rabbis do not come up with every single word of everything that they write originally as everything all the time, right? The two main places where this happens, and there are huge caveats with what I'm about to say because this has to be done ethically and properly, is, for example, let's say you're giving a class, right? You may hand out a source sheet with some of the sources that you want to talk about. Many people, especially now with the advent of Sefaria as having changed the way that many people think about Jewish learning, there are thousands of source sheets available, and nobody expects you to have put together your own source sheet. Many times rabbis are borrowing source sheets from each other or finding one on Sefaria. The caveat to that is that you put on there, this source sheet was compiled by Rabbi X. I'm teaching it. I'm a great educator.
You credit.
It's like putting together
Footnotes.
a textbook. You're not expecting to put a textbook together every time you're teaching a class. You buy a professionally made textbook. Sometimes you buy a textbook of a source sheet and you give a class based on that. But you
That's
tell people,
different.
I didn't put together this source sheet. Or you say, I heard this class and this lecture from somebody else. I would like to tell it to you today, so that the ideas are not your own. Plenty of rabbis use plenty of ideas that they've heard from plenty of other rabbis or other non-rabbis in their sermons, but then they say, I heard this idea from Rabbi X,
Yeah.
or I heard this story from Rabbi X, instead of casting it in your own light. There used to be a practice.
So this rabbi gave no props.
Nothing. There's also the practice of, like, for example, stock sermons, right? Where if you're giving a eulogy, and it's less of a practice today because plenty of people want things more personal. But if you look especially in the old rabbi manuals of the days of yore, and I like collecting old rabbi manuals, you'll find like these standard one-page, sermons for an unveiling or for a funeral or for a bar mitzvah.
Right.
And they'll give you like sermon A, sermon B, and sermon C. And they're basically written out sermons that people can do. But people weren't, first of all, the internet didn't exist, so it was very easy to like just have that. But people also just didn't necessarily rely on those and weren't expecting rabbis to be as completely original. And rabbis, I assume, were also, either using those when they were really, strapped for time, or they would use them as jumping off points for their own ideas and own ways to move forward. But taking a sermon and just repeating it without telling somebody that somebody else wrote the sermon is, that's not a good
How did
thing.
that make you feel when you heard about this story? Because you're a rabbi, what was going on for you as you were reading?
Again, it's a bonkers story. I will admit that there are rabbis that actually do this stuff. I mean, I've seen rabbis give classes without giving attribution or educators, but I mean, that's not exclusive to rabbis. I wouldn't know, but I don't think I've ever heard of a rabbi that was plagiarizing sermons word for word or major section for major section.
It's
without
kind of
that.
funny. It's like terrible, but it's kind of funny.
It is.
Like, how do you guys feel like if you went to a play and you found out a year later that the author just plagiarized this from like some high school B level something or other, but because they were a famous author, they were like, oh, that's a great piece.
People say that Shakespeare maybe didn't write some of his
happens
plays.
all the time.
That's a big thing in the theater community.
Yeah, but nobody takes issue with Shakespeare not writing any of his plays. How would we feel today if like a modern playwright just sort of said, I stole this from another play, or I stole this from a book?
Right. Well, it reminds me of, I remember back in like the early 2000s, there was a lot of scandal around musicians lip syncing to music that they weren't actually singing. I don't know if you remember any of those stories. I was quite young.
Milli Vanilli?
There was a bunch of them, and then there was like a
Ashley Simpson on
well,
SNL.
Ashley Simpson,
yeah,
I remember,
sure.
but I remember when I was even younger, there was some band, and they hadn't even written any of their music. They were stealing it from some other band across the world.
Milli Vanilli.
Okay, it was probably that. I was a
Vanilli.
kid. I don't remember. I just remember my
that was
mom
before
picking me
our
up
time.
and telling me this story after I came home from elementary school. Don't know why that's a memory I've retained, but
What year was that in elementary school?
I graduated in 2005, so sometime before then.
Oh, so this is not that. This was in the early 90s.
Well, I was alive in the
1990s,
early 90s.
89, 90.
Anyway.
But you weren't hearing this story in the early 90s.
Well, I was born in 93, so
1990. Yeah.
infant me.
Do you think this is just a greater problem in our society where we've just gotten
Go ahead.
where we've just gotten so lazy now, where we just pull things,
I think the
whether
opposite
we're
is true.
rabbis or musicians?
I think it's harder to plagiarize nowadays because even though there is a plethora of data and information and wisdom on the internet, it's so much easier to figure out whether somebody is plagiarizing or not.
Yeah, it's the moral decline of our civilization.
Don't copy things from the internet. Like, this is just, it seems basic.
He could have gotten a
Yeah, but then you
ghostwriter.
gotta pay the guy, and you gotta and it takes time and energy, and then somebody's in on it. Remember,
What's going to
two
happen
people
now?
know about it.
Is this guy going to get
He's on-
sued?
I don't know.
What's happening?
The
Is
article
there gonna
says
be a
he's on
legal-
medical leave. I suspect he wasn't well. I don't know what the story is. I don't want to cast aspersions. There's only one article that's
Okay.
out there. When I remember speaking to my friend Eric about this, he went and said he gets a call from Australia where the synagogue had to or somebody in the synagogue had to inform him of this, and then a week or two later, I don't remember, sometime after, a friend of his then calls him and says, you're in the news. Like, he didn't think that it would become a media story. And then it became a media story, and then his name gets, put up in this, as a news story. So that's kind of crazy.
I mean, it's great for him in some way. Like, he has the upper hand in the situation. People are like, wow, your sermons were so good.
But somebody
this
wants to
rabbi
steal it.
wanted to steal them. It's like the imitation is the highest form of flattery. That's what my grade 6 teacher used to tell me when other kids would copy what I was doing. It's my art project.
Oh, so you've been plagiarized. Is that why you're so bitter?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And people used to look over to see what I was writing on tests and things. I've been there.
Okay.
Would you forgive this rabbi if you were part of their congregation? Would you come back and sort of say, it's okay, you made a mistake, we're willing to listen to you again?
God, I don't know if I'd feel really weird going to that shul if I knew my rabbi had no words of wisdom of his own. it wouldn't feel so meaningful to me anymore, personally.
I mean, he could do a great speech on, apologizing and not plagiarizing. That could be his
Well,
like
he's more of like an actor
first
saying a
one.
script than a rabbi giving his own sermons.
We pay
at
tons
that
of money
point,
to
isn't
hear
it?
actors say scripts, don't we?
Sometimes less than deserved, I would say.
And tons of money. Wait, whoa. Yeah, let's take a step back here.
Anyways, well, some actors get paid
That's
tons
true.
of money. Yeah, I don't know. I think it depends on the nature of the return or repentance or tshuva that this person had, and whether he is believed to have sincerely repented or not. And that's an open question. I'm not going to answer that until I know what this person is trying to
Yeah,
do.
I
to
would love.
return or
I would love to
fix
hear
this.
what our listeners think. Definitely reach out and let us know
Yes.
in the comments. I would love to hear.
Have you plagiarized? Are you from Australia and are you a member of this congregation? We'd love to hear from you and hear your thoughts about this. Reach out to us at bonjour@thecjn.ca. bonjour@thecjn.ca for all your comments and questions. You can also email us at bonjour@thecjn.ca to give us some book recommendations. We're still collecting some book recommendations for the month of November, where we will try to spend our first segment looking at different books, Canadian books, Jewish books, Canadian Jewish books, new, old. What are your classics? What are your favorites? So yes, reach out to us and we will hopefully have some great book recommendations starting next week so that November you will have, if you are choosing to join up with us to read along, you'll know what to read in advance. Excellent. Actually, Elu, they do wonderful stuff. I just picked up this bangle for my wife. I don't know if you see it. It's a really cool shape. It's got a circle in the middle. It's got vaguely triangular. It's got this nice beaten feeling about it. I don't know if we'll be able to have you guys read that in depth, really up close because of our webcams and stuff. But I don't know if you can read, but there's
No.
some writing across the end over there.
Yeah, I can see that there's something
There's
engraved,
something
but I
engraved.
can't see what it is.
It says on
The
there,
one ring to rule them all.
no, but it does say, nevertheless, she persisted. And this is the
I
work
love that.
of a jeweler called Dana Bronfman, and she takes these wonderful sayings and engraves them onto her jewelry. Has a really modern, rustic. I don't know how to describe the sensibility of this, but I really liked
It's kind
it.
of like
and,
bronzer goldish looking.
yeah,
It's hard for me
kind
to
of.
see.
But it's nice.
Yeah,
We
it's
can
like
check it out.
It's not like a plain circle.
Yep.
It has dimension.
So this is one of the many lines that they have at Atelier Lou. Dana Bronfman is a wonderful jeweler, New York-based, and she does this stuff. You should check it out. I like the fact that there is meaning infused into the jewelry instead of just a visual beauty attached to it. Where can we get Atelier Lou's selection?
Great question, Avi. You can go on the website atelierlou.com, and if you are a Bonjour Chai listener, you can use the code BON18 at checkout and get 10% off your order.
Now, when you say Lou, is it Loo or different way of spelling? Because I've always wondered as a listener.
Lou. That's a good question. It's Atelier, atelier, the French word, Lou.
Because not everyone listening is from Quebec.
This is true.
This is true.
The donating of organs, both from live donors, as in the case of kidney donation, or after death for many other organs, is the source of much discussion and debate within the Jewish community. We initially decided to cover this story because David came to us and we'd asked him and said, listen, what are some of the stories that you'd like to cover? And David said he'd like to cover organ donation. David, why did you want to cover organ donation within the Jewish community?
Well, last week I celebrated my 23rd birthday, or rather re-birthday of my liver. When I was 11 years old, I received a liver transplant at the Montreal Children's Hospital. It's been a part of me for my entire life in terms of adjustments to my life, how things change when you receive an organ donation, the medication you're on, a lot of the uncertainty itself. I was very curious what Orthodox Jews and non-Orthodox Jews have to say about organ donation, what has been going on in the past 20 years. I was curious. I remember when I was waiting for an organ donation, I was very sick in the hospital. My father called around to a bunch of different rabbis to seek their advice and opinion on this subject matter. And really, the end of the day, they all sort of said, if it's to save a life, it trumps everything. And with that, we went ahead and I was very lucky. Within 3 weeks, I was put at the top of the list of the organ donation list in Canada. And I received a liver from a 67-year-old gentleman from Alberta.
That's really great. Amazing. We are going to hear from a person who actually is on a waiting list. So there's a woman, Elena Solomon, who is actively searching for a kidney. We are going to hear from her shortly. As we were recording, we actually heard about a second case of an individual in Waterloo who is also looking for one, and we'll put links to both of those in the show notes. But first, with us to talk about Judaism and organ donation in general is Robby Berman, who is the founder and director of the Halachic Organ Donor Society. Robby, welcome to the program.
How are you?
Great. How are you?
Great.
Good. Thanks for inviting me.
Why don't you tell us about the Halachic Organ Donor Society in general, what got you going to make this happen? And I get emails from you all the time, so I know that this is like a very big cause for you personally. You seem to be donating hundreds and hundreds of hours of volunteer on this program. Tell us about the Halachic Organ Donor Society.
So it's an organization that's meant to try to educate Jews about the halachic and medical issues surrounding organ donation. Jews have one of the worst organ donor registration rates in the world. New York State has the worst organ donor registration rate, partly according to the New York Times and the New York Organ Donor Network, because of the Jewish population there. Jews, and I'm talking about all Jews, including secular Jews, tend not to donate. Most Jews in the world are secular, but they refuse to donate for religious reasons. In other words, you'll have a Jew who does not observe any part of halacha, any part of Judaism, any part of Torah. But when it comes to donating organs and they're asked to donate, they say, no, Jews don't do that. We won't do it. It's against our religion. So I decided to start an organization 20 years ago that could try to maybe re-educate Jews and try to show them that halacha, Jewish law, supports organ donation. There is a debate about brain death, which is organs are taken.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that, actually. Because I was doing some research to prepare for this episode. I know very little about this topic, and a lot of things about brain death were popping up. Can you explain what that means to us?
Yeah, so most people don't understand what brain death means. And really, when we use the term, we use it incorrectly. We should never say the term brain death. Doctors make a mistake. Journalists make a mistake. We should always say brain dead with a beating heart. That's what we mean. That weird situation where you're in the hospital, you're on a ventilator, your brain dies, but your heart doesn't know enough to stop beating because it's still getting oxygen from the machine. I mean, brain death is not a new phenomenon. We bury people in cemeteries because their brain has died. So brain death is not a new concept, although it sounds like it is. It's brain death with a beating heart. That is a new concept that people try to find it hard to wrap their heads around, no pun intended, in order for them to understand that a person, a human being, an organism can be dead while the organs can remain alive. And that's like a new phenomenon that's only been around since the 1950s.
So you are or not allowed to have an organ donated from someone who is brain dead, according to halacha. I mean, I know according to halacha, you've debunked all of it, but when people are faced with this situation, what is the misconception that they have around brain death transplant?
The misconception, well, most people don't have any misconception. They just have a superstitious knee-jerk reaction to saying no to organ donation. They have no idea why.
Interesting.
In fact, those people who are educated, Orthodox Jews, are more likely to donate organs because they're educated about it. They know what the issues are. So but for those people who are educated and still say no to organ donation, is because they view brain dead with a beating heart as someone who is alive, right? They view a beating heart as a sign of human life, and no rabbi is going to allow you to donate organs of a person who's alive, because then you're killing the person. So that's why there are many prestigious, well-known halachic rabbinic decisors that say no to organ donation. My problem with them is that if you want to reject brain death, I mean, modern medicine understands brain death with a beating heart to be death. But if you want to reject that, that's your right. And they try to find sources in the Talmud for that. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But then they should forbid their congregation from taking organs from people, right? Because then you're asking doctors to murder, in their eyes, to murder other people to give them organs. So let's be consistent. You want to say no, you will not donate, fine. Don't donate and don't take. But It seems that some people don't seem to have a problem with that.
Right. And so the whole idea of debunking it is around pikuach nefesh. Is that right? Preserving life?
Well, no. This
or is it more complex than that?
No, this issue has nothing. The brain death issue doesn't.
I don't mean the brain death issue. I mean generally, why we are all allowed as Jews halachically.
Right. I mean, there are certain prohibitions concerning a cadaver. You're not allowed to get benefit from a cadaver, meaning you can't sell a cadaver to a medical school, make money from it. You're not allowed to delay burial of a cadaver, and you're not allowed to willy-nilly destroy a cadaver. Those are three biblical prohibitions. But in the face of saving a life, you're allowed to override almost every single commandment of the Torah. So when someone says, "Oh, Jews are not allowed to eat pork," that's not true. Jews are allowed to eat pork if it can save their life. Jews are allowed to drive on the Sabbath if it can save a life, and so too Jews are allowed to violate the prohibitions of a cadaver if it can save a life. That's not the issue. The issue is whether or not the person is actually dead, because you're not allowed to kill one person to save another person. So that's the issue. If the person's really alive, then you would be killing him. So that's the debate, the brain death debate.
What I'm curious about, because first of all, two things. First of all, what is the kind of pushback that you have these people tell you that, yeah, we'll gladly take organs, but we're not willing to like give any?
I'm just horrified to say it depends how many people you have listened to this podcast.
We got quite a big number.
Well, I'm afraid to say it because it's just horrific. But some of them have said to me, "Well, we're not doing the murdering. The doctors are doing the murdering. So what do we care if the doctors are doing the murdering?" Wow, that's some of them
offensive on so many levels.
Oh yeah, and there's another thing saying, "Oh well, if the majority of people in the country are non-Jews, and they want to give their organs, so what do we care if we have the doctors murder the non-Jews?" I mean, like just horrific stuff. Would
they take it? And again, this is all offensive, but I'm going to dig one step further. Would they be willing to take an organ from a Jewish individual? Or they actually will put their money where their mouth is and say, we're not going to take an organ from a Jewish person?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's some people who are a little bit more principled and say, "Oh, I won't take it if it comes from a Jew." But I don't know. I mean, to go down that rabbit hole is just not a pleasant thing to do.
Now, one of the things that HODS also does is with living organ donations with kidneys, and promotes discussions around that. And I find that within the ultra-Orthodox and the Haredi community that there is much more discussion. There's so much promotion. There was a famous This American Life episode about this Haredi woman who donated a kidney and then convinced many other Hasidim to donate kidneys. Do you think that there's some relationship between the one and the other, in that there is this recognition, well, if we can't donate organs, right, because we don't believe in that for whatever misguided reason, at least we can donate kidneys and other organs that can be given as living organ donations?
So just to set the record straight, so we did do in the beginning living kidney donation. We do not do that anymore. We haven't done it in years.
Okay.
There are organizations like Renewal in New York and like
and Toronto,
Madat Chaim in Israel. Israel has, by the way, the highest rate of living kidney donation to altruistically. I don't mean a guy donating to his father or siblings, but I mean clearly walking to the hospital saying, "Don't take my kidney, save a human life," and that life could be Palestinian. So Israel has the highest organ donor registration or organ donor rate from a living kidney donor. Whether it's connected, it could be that's the reason they say we can't donate when we're dead, so let's donate at least when we're alive. It could be. I mean, there's a great sense of helping people. There's a great sense. Most of the people who donate are like religious Zionists, actually.
Interesting.
I'm wondering, right now we're having a lot of conversations in North America about switching from an opt-in to an opt-out kind of procedure right now. Nova Scotia is the first province to actually do something. Well, I'm curious what your beliefs are.
This is an audio medium. Robbie is giving his thumbs down many, many times.
So yeah, I'm not in favor of opt-out. I've been interviewed many times about this. I'm in favor of opt-out if it works. I don't believe it works, and I believe people are not looking at the statistics appropriately. They're not looking at the base rates. Opt-out. Look, let's do like a thought experiment, okay? We go to the hospital. Your brother, it was in a car accident. He had brain damage. They put him on a ventilator. After he was on the ventilator, his brain died. So now his heart doesn't stop beating because it's getting the oxygen artificially, and the heart will continue to beat for another few days before it stops. The transplant coordinator comes along and says, "Hey, would you like to donate organs?" So the family says, "Well, I feel uncomfortable about it, either because I'm a Jew or whatever. I feel uncomfortable." Then they open his wallet and they find an organ donor card. He opted in. He has a card. Most people, in 99% of all cases, will say, "Oh, he had a card? Okay, we will honor his last wish and donate his organs." Now let's do the other part of this thought experiment. You go into the hospital, your brother's brain dead, and they say, "Would you like to donate his organs?" And you say no. And they say, "Well, he never opted out. He never opted out," which means that he wanted to be an organ donor. And they say, "Well, I know my brother. He was a lazy bastard. I don't care that he didn't opt out. He didn't want to be an organ donor." Or I'm suspicious of the medical establishment, and I see that you guys control the list of the opt out, and I think you're hiding it from me. I think my brother did opt out, and you're not telling it to me. So if you just in the thought experiment alone, you can see why it wouldn't work. I'm not in favor of the opt-out situation. That's trying to coerce people to become organ donors. I'm in favor of education and not legislation. I think that's the way to go. This is a very sensitive issue. There are a lot of components here, emotional components, religious components. You don't want to start forcing it down people's throats and saying, oh, if you don't opt out, we're going to take the organs. And they don't take the organs against the family's will anyway. They asked the family, so the family could reject it. I said, I don't care, my brother didn't opt out. He never got around to it. He just didn't, he didn't see the notice. He didn't see the advertisement in the newspaper to opt out. So I'm against it. And I
Couldn't
don't
this be
think
part of a nudge in a sense where we're talking about we have one of the worst organ donation rates in the industrialized world here in Canada. And if we nudge people to sort of say you are presumed to be donating your organs if and when you do die tragically or at an old age, right now we could actually increase the amount of organ donation we have and save up to 8 lives per individual, rather than just sort of saying, oh, he never talked about it in his family, we never discussed it, and right now we're dealing with a tragedy. We can't even think about organ donation.
I mean, if you take a look at the numbers, I think Wales, they started in England with Wales, and the numbers haven't gone up. All the countries that they say, look at Spain. Spain has opt out, so the numbers are up. Well, look at their opt-in. Before they were opt-out, they were opt-in. Spain had the highest numbers in the world for organ donations. It went from like 75 to 80% to 90%. So great. So it only added 10%. It doesn't work. And by the way, what works in one country doesn't work in another country. There are different cultures and different concerns. Most people in America, most people in Israel are very suspicious of the government taking away their rights, taking things, take higher taxes. They're taking my money. They're taking away my right to own a gun. They're taking away this and that. And now all of a sudden you want to take my organs because I didn't opt out? No. And there'll be a pushback. I think it's bad public policy. Am I being too ambiguous there?
Well, no, I just think I look at it, you say it's just 10%, but 10% will save many people's lives. And right now we are not doing well at all.
No, it only saved people's lives in Spain. There was a 10% bump in Spain, but that doesn't mean it's going to work in other countries. And you might have a backlash. And I think they tried it in England, and it didn't work. It didn't increase. It's a backlash. It's bad public policy. In my opinion, look, if it works, I'm in favor of it. I just don't think it works. And when people look at the numbers, they forget to look at the base rates. They'll point to countries, say, look at all the organ donation going on in this country because they have opt-out. Well, what was their base rate of organ donation before opt-out? And you see it was very high. You don't see a country that had very low organ donation. All of a sudden they adopt opt-out, and it's a miracle. Hallelujah. And now people are donating organs. You don't see that happening.
What do you think can be done more and better within the Jewish community? And I know that that's what you do all the day. So I'm asking you, like, what's on the horizon? What's the future? What's the next big thing for the Halachic Organ Donor Society?
Well, we're currently making we made a movie about 12 years ago explaining the finality of brain death, because research shows that the better a family that understands the finality of brain death, the more likely they are to consider organ donation for obvious reasons. A lot of people watch these videos on YouTube or and you see these people saying, oh, I woke up from brain death. And no one's ever woken up in the history of brain death. I won't go into the reasons why, but medically it's impossible. Your brain begins to melt. It undergoes a process called lysis. But people talk about these stories all the time, and rumors go around, and urban myths and legends. So we made a video. The video went viral. Hundreds of thousands of people watched it. We got calls from the Islamic regime of Pakistan for them to do it, a version in Paki for them. And we did in Pakistan, in Urdu, I think it was. And then we did one we're now doing, so anyway, we're doing a new video using whiteboard animation. We did the English version, and now we're doing Hebrew, Arabic, and Hindi. And that's going to be coming out in the next, I think, 2-3 weeks. And we have other things that we have down the pipeline, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. We're probably going to be taking the organization in a slightly different direction and make us an end-of-life organization in general, and just organ donation being one of those options. There are a lot of end-of-life organizations out there that are typically very right-wing, and they've kind of lost perspective of the big picture. So you call them up and say, hey, my father is 94 years old. He's got terminal cancer in horrific pain. His body is shutting down. His fingers are black with necrosis. They want to amputate his leg. What should we do? And the organization says, put him on a ventilator. Keep that heart pumping. And you have to let the body take, we're not of that opinion. So we're going to become more of an end-of-life organization going forward, and organization will just be one of those options.
That's interesting that you bring that up, that the, because so much of what we spend so much money on end-of-life care to prolong life by a week or two, maybe, and we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if that wasn't happening, not only would we be saving that money, we'd be saving lives at the same time. So it's a double-edged, benefit to the community at large. When
you're keeping a cadaver with a beating heart in the hospital, and that's what a brain-dead beating heart patient is, a cadaver with a beating heart, you're taking away money from the government, money that could be used for cancer research. You're taking away the time of the medical staff, of the nurses. You're taking away a bed. You're taking away a ventilator. These are resources that are needed. This is money and time that is needed. And you're causing a nurse that has 10 patients to take care of in a shift. Now she's got to take care of 13 patients. 3 of them are actually medically dead. their brain is dead and their heart's just pumping because it doesn't know that the brain has died for another few days or another few weeks. There is a cost.
There's a famous article that came out a little while ago by Zeke Emanuel, who was a famous bioethicist in the US, who talked about that. And he famously said, once I pass 75, don't give me anything more stronger than aspirin, by which he meant, whatever. But like he got it and he understood that. So I highly encourage everybody to read that article.
I wrote the same thing, but I wrote morphine instead of aspirin.
Oh, there you go. One last thing. I am a card carrying member right there since, what is it, 2008. I'm part of the rabbinic team here. What can you tell us about the card and how people can get it and how it actually works? Like, give us your number one success story of how this card actually saved lives.
So we had a family, an Iranian family, a Persian family that wasn't observant. They went to shul twice a year in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur to a Reform synagogue. And the brother had a stroke. They rushed him to the hospital. They put him on a ventilator, helped him breathe. And it was too late. A few hours later, his brain got swollen, blocked the blood flow, no oxygen to the brain died. But he's on a ventilator, right? So the transplant coordinator comes in and speaks to the brother. The brother, by the way, is a physician and says, will you donate his organs? He said, no, we're Jewish. We don't do that. And she says, well, you're not Orthodox or conservative, right? He goes, no, we're not even barely Reform. We just go to a shul twice a year. So she calls up, the transplant coordinator calls up the rabbi of the shul. The rabbi of the shul comes to the hospital. And the rabbi of the shul says, donate his organs. It's the right thing to do, the Reform rabbi. And he says, no, we're Jews, real traditional Jews, real Jews with beards. Don't do this. We're not going to donate organs. And then they opened his wallet and they found inside a card from the Halachic Organ Donor Society. And the brother, who was a physician, was shocked. He called me up. I was in Israel at like 3 a.m. and he woke me up and he said, who are you guys? You guys aren't really Orthodox. Jew. I said, well, go to our website. You'll see hundreds of rabbis with beards and black hats that have our organ donor card. We're pretty from. There are rabbis who are against it, but there are rabbis who are for it. And your brother choose to be a part of it. Your brother, if you do not donate his organs, you're going against the wishes of your brother. And there are major halachic opinions such as Moshe Feinstein, Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, Rav Yosef, the chief rabbin of Israel, that accept brain death as halachic death and support organ donation. And you're going against your brother's last wishes. And they called me back an hour later, said, okay, we'll do it. And he wasn't able to save 8 lives. They saved 5 lives with their brother's donation. Yeah.
So yes, go get a card, go to
HODS. HODS. That stands for Halachic Organ Donor Society.
We'll put the link in the show notes.
And .org doesn't stand for organs. It stands for organization like 501c3.
Oh, well, there you go. Excellent. Thank you, Robby Berman. Please go check out hods.org and get a card if you can. Please do. It's at the very least one can do for the rest of the Jewish community. Thank you again, Robby Berman, and hopefully we'll have many successes from this. Before we move on from this topic, we thought it'd be important, of course, to discuss this with somebody who's actually waiting for a donation. So on the line with us is Elena Solomon, who has been writing about the process on her blog, Elena's Journey, My Quest to Find a Kidney. Elena, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Why don't you walk us through a little bit of what you've been through and where we stand right now?
So just briefly, in 2006, I was diagnosed with a fairly rare condition. At the time, it was called Wegener's. They refer to it now as granulomatosis with polyangiitis, or GPA. It's an autoimmune disorder, and for me, it affected my kidneys. So for a long time, I was stable. My kidneys had declined to about 10%, but we can live with that. So I was leading an active, my regular lifestyle. And then then what happened in 2019, they started to decline. So they measure it by what's called the GFR level. And kind of the magic number is 15. If you go below 15, you're kind of end stage kidney disease and you're going into renal failure. So I'm below 15. I sit somewhere at about, I vary between 11 and 12. So which means I need a kidney transplant in order to survive.
Right. And then you started this blog. Can you tell us a bit about what inspired you to share your story publicly in that way?
It was suggested because I was quite at the beginning optimistic because I have 3 brothers who readily came forward and wanted to be tested. But unfortunately, all 3 were declined from different reasons. I actually had a couple friends that came forward and also were again declined for medical reasons. So actually, it was my friends who were amazing, decided we need to kind of do this on a bigger scale, and decided to use social media, which was suggested for us as well. Because there's only so much that you can do sending out emails to friends. The issue is they keep going to the same people.
Right.
So we tried to just go a little wider. And also I felt, a lot of people were asking all the time, how are you doing? And they wanted updates and things like that. And it was a little bit easier for me to kind of put everything down on paper, and then just refer people to the blog if they wanted to know my story. And it was also helpful for me, truth be told, writing it, just putting it down and seeing it there, and also just having it recorded, like for me, like on the written paper, having it down there, and being able to refer people to it. And it was also another way to kind of get it out there a little bit wider if I had it that way. So I'm not quite sure, because for people in my situation who are looking for kidneys, and I'm one of many, I'm one of probably hundreds in Toronto, in Canada. I can't speak for obviously in the States, but there's many who are looking for a kidney. So it's just, we're all kind of looking for different ways to get our story out there.
I do sympathize and agree. When I was 11, I myself needed a liver. And I remember they scoured across the country to find a liver from Alberta, and then they shipped it across to Montreal, where I received it. It's been 23 years now. So I do sympathize a lot with what you're going through right now in terms of the uncertainty. I'm just wondering sort of what is your day-to-day life like now in terms of going through it, in terms of any of the struggles or anything that just keeps you optimistic on the outlook?
So for me, I'm trying to kind of circumvent having to, thank God, I'm not at the point. Even though my levels are very low, I don't have a lot of the symptoms that normally textbook come with that level. So the only thing that I can do for me now is try to stay as healthy as I can, so that when that person hopefully does come forward, I'm in a good position. There's one thing also, you also have to be, it's one thing having the donor, but you also have to be a good candidate. Because there's a lot of people who, they might have a donor, but they're just not a candidate to receive a kidney. So I'm not on dialysis. I'm trying to kind of circumvent that by trying to get a donor prior to. So the only thing that I can do for me to kind of do that is, try to just stay healthy by exercise and diet. But those are the only things. Everything else is kind of out of my control, and it can change on a dime. And for me, it would only be at this point, because I'm not on dialysis. I don't know if a lot of people know, but in order to even receive a deceased kidney, you have to be on dialysis. And it varies. It can be from 3 to 5 years, all the way up to more than 10 years. Really depending on your medical situation and your blood type.
What sorts of resources have you seen or have you found within the Jewish community?
Within the Jewish community, I only really know of one. People always ask me, well, can't you put your name on a list, or isn't there a list? There's a lot of misconceptions around, I even had a friend in from the States visiting the other day, and she said, well, we have like a registry or something like that, but we don't really have anything like that. You do for deceased, but not for living donors. And we don't really have that in Canada either, as far as I know. But there is an agency, a charitable organization that I am associated with, called Renewal. Where they are good is that, I guess, if someone did call in anonymously and they do have people on their list, they can refer them, I guess, to that person. But I think it's not like it's, I've been on the list for 2 years and I don't have a kidney from them. So I'm not quite sure. You can't really put all your kind of eggs in that basket. You still have, that's why I do the social media stuff as well. But if someone did come forward and reach out to Renewal because they just altruistically wanted to donate a kidney, they would go through Renewal. And I know Renewal tries to do outreach as well. And where they are excellent is assisting the the donor along the journey.
So essentially, it sounds like from what I've known from a bit from Renewal is they do a lot of this assistance. They also, and the flip side of it is that they advocate and they do a lot of work within the community to talk about the fact that kidney donation is important, is an accepted and wonderful thing that one can do as a member of the community, and that there isn't necessarily something wrong with it as a Jewish person. Have you ever received any pushback from within the community about this? I mean, I hope not, but I always,
In what respect?
imagine the worst in terms of like people who are like, well, you shouldn't be asking people for kidneys or things along those lines. I mean, I think we're pretty much at the point where everybody understands the value and the importance of kidney donation.
For me personally, never. Everyone's been amazing, and very supportive. And, I find like people are wanting to share posts and they're sending heartfelt comments and things like that, but it's just it's just always needing that one person to come forward.
Is there more work that can be done within the larger Canadian community in terms of educating and advocating for organ donation? Are we behind other countries? Are we ahead of other countries? We like to think that we're a very nice population, but I keep hearing, and again, a lot of it is hearsay, and you probably know more than I do, that the organ donation lists are way more filled right now with people looking for organs than people willing or able to donate.
100%. And I totally agree with what you're saying as far as is just, I think it's changing a little bit as far as people being aware of kidney donors and things like that, but it's very slow.
If we have anyone listening that's at the beginning of the journey that you're on, and they just found out that they need a kidney or another part, what type of advice would you give someone who's at the beginning of their journey that you wish you had known when you started?
I'm not quite sure. I think because initially what you're doing, and I'm part of different support groups and things like that. So listen to people who are at all different stages as well. And I think that's actually one thing, maybe I should point out, is that most hospitals in the GTA, and I'm sure across Canada, have different support networks available where you can speak to other kidney people at the same stage where you are, or people who are a bit ahead of you, so that you can learn from their experience, kind of, what dialysis is and the different kinds of dialysis, should you have to go that route, or what are the different symptoms. So there's I think that is something someone should get hooked up with, because it's a wealth of information that's just kind of there. Instead of just kind of reading the stuff and wondering, you can ask people.
That's wonderful.
And they're amazing. And then I think it's just a matter of, you can't kind of sit back on your haunches and kind of think that people are going to come necessarily knocking at your door. I think you need to kind of get your story out there. And it's kind of sometimes a big pill to swallow for some people, because it's very personal stuff that you have to say, I'm just going to get it out there, because otherwise, if people don't know my story, I'm just limiting the amount of people who would potentially come forward for me.
Well, we have a wide enough listenership that I hope and pray that one of our listeners would come forward and say, you know what, this is actually hopefully worthwhile and something that they want to do. There are many, many testimonials on the Renewal site of people who have donated kidneys and have talked about it. And I highly encourage, if you're even thinking about that, to go check it out. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. We'll put a link to your blog in the show notes. And we wish you all the best. And hopefully we will be around, and maybe we'll interview you hopefully soon after your successful kidney transplant. And
Fingers
we'll have a happy
crossed.
ending to that.
That'd be amazing. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Elena Solomon. You can find links to her blog and to the Halachic Organ Donor Society page in the show notes. You can email us at bonjour@thecjn.ca to let us know what you thought about this. Our original word of wisdom this week comes from Rabbi Eric Grossman. Rabbi Grossman is the head of school at the Akiva School in Montreal.
We have this curious story in the Parsha this week about Abraham buying a piece of real estate in Hebron. And it's curious, it's odd, because it was offered to him for free. And besides that, he had also been living there in Hebron for many, many years, probably decades. He was even visited there by God himself and the angels. And in addition, God had promised that Hebron and the rest of the land of Israel would belong to his descendants. So why would he feel compelled to purchase it? And I think this story raises implicitly the question, what does it mean for something to belong to us? Abraham, I believe, is thinking, we have something that is given to us, something that we're connected to already, or something that's been promised, and yet we still have a nagging feeling that it's not really ours. And that's why Abraham purchases it, because the act of purchase, the act of buying something, since ancient times until modern times, has always been a definitive way of making something ours. And the Torah seems to agree, because no fewer than 5 times between our parsha and the end of Genesis, the Torah repeats the fact that Abraham bought this piece of land. In other words, it's really his. The irony is that the next time that Hebron appears in the Torah, it's when Moses sends out scouts to Hebron, because it's now occupied by a people who clearly don't care that it belongs to the Jewish people, that it belongs to Abraham. It's occupied by a race of giants. They're there, and they're not giving it up. And in fact, the only way that it comes back into the hands of the Jewish people is because Joshua conquers it by force. The fact that it was owned by us is absolutely irrelevant and never gets mentioned again in the Tanakh. Interestingly enough, this drama replays itself in modern times. Over the last few centuries, Jews have bought pieces of land in Hebron, and there was actually a very fine Jewish community living in Hebron, until in 1929 they were massacred and had to flee from their homes. In fact, that happened again in 1948 during the War of Independence. The residents in Hebron, the Jews who lived there, were also forced to flee. And when we returned to Hebron in 1967, after the Six-Day War, none less than the Israeli Supreme Court ruled that the Jews who had fled could not reclaim their land. The fact that they owned it, the fact that it was theirs legally, made no difference. And so the history of Hebron tells us that there is really nothing that is ever truly ours in this world. It's almost as if we are trying to say to the earth, you belong to me, and the earth says back to us, no, but one day you will be mine. And I think in the end, the story of Hebron challenges us to ask of ourselves, can we really say of anything of ours on God's earth, this is mine? Shabbat Shalom.
And now we get to the point in our program where we talk about nachas.
So before I begin my nachas of the week, I actually want to do a big mea culpa to all my Alberta family and friends. I was so excited for my first episode last week when I introduced my white hat. I called it a Stenson hat. It's actually a Stetson hat. I really hope I'm not in everyone's bad books here. Please forgive me, Alberta family and friends. And actually, there is even a Jewish connection to this hat. Alana, Avi, do you remember what the Jewish connection to the Stetson hat is?
Aside from many Jews wear Stetsons?
Yeah, we can go with that itself.
Enlighten us.
But no, I can't even remember. But I remember I did some research. I looked it up. But I remember. What was it? She said when we did the podcast last week that there was a Jewish connection to the hat itself.
Right, this is going to be like a 5-piece segment of just making up for
You're
all
gonna
of
need
this.
to make a mea culpa to your mea culpa next week and tell us what the Jewish connection is.
I looked. I couldn't find it.
David, what's your nachas been this week?
All right. So my nachas this week is for Limud Ottawa. On the weekend, they put together an event for Irving Layton, his Jewish poems itself. Max Layton, his younger son, read some of his most famous poems. It was a really wonderful event to listen to and to talk about one of the most famous Canadian Jewish poets of our time, I would say. Interestingly enough, I am also related to Irving Layton. His, what is it? I asked my father for our connection, and he said it was Irving Layton's... My great-grandmother Esther was his sister. That's it.
Wow, that's not that far off.
It's not that far off. So thank you very much, Limud Ottawa, for putting that event together. It was very special.
Amazing. My Irving Layton taught my father English, actually, and I own the thesaurus that Irving Layton gave to and inscribed for my father.
If I'm not mistaken, I also have an Irving Layton connection. Forgive me if I get this wrong, but I am pretty sure that my brother lives in Irving Layton's old apartment.
In Côte Saint
His
Luc.
literal apartment.
We hit the Layton trifecta on the today's nachas.
If I got that wrong, I apologize, and I will correct it next week.
Excellent. Alana, what's your nachas been?
So after moving quite a few times since I left Vancouver in August, I'm finally going to be moving into my long-term place for the 1st of November, and I'm going to be moving back into a Moisha house. I'm reinserting myself.
Whitehorse?
Of Whitehorse? No. Oh.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going for.
No.
I'm Moisha hopping.
Antigonish?
Yep. Moisha house. Hamilton, who knows? No, I'm moving into one of the Toronto Moisha houses. There's actually 4 of them in the city, not the town, which is incredible. And already, without having moved in yet, I've been going to a lot of the events, and it's amazing how many people are coming out. So it'll be great to put that hat back on and also not move again every single month.
Yeah, good for you.
Thank you.
Great nachas.
What is yours?
I'm going to start just with a bit of an expansion, not really a correction. When I spoke about last week's nachas, Maimonides Nuts, the artist Sophia Zohar, I did not realize that her Instagram is actually so amazing. It's just that's the main work where she's sending all this work out. She's putting up great images, great drawings, great ideas. Really, 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 I'm going to double down on that one. So I want to correct it. It's not just a page with some, an artist page with some prints and some mugs and, masks and stuff. Her Instagram is amazing. Check it out, Maimonides Nuts. But that's last week's. I saw this story this week that came across my radar, and I just had to talk about it because this is so Montreal, and I loved my nachas this week from Montrealers standing up for Montreal. So there's this Ottawa bagel shop called Kettleman's Bagels, and they're a chain. Apparently, there are a few different branches of this Kettleman's Bagels in Ottawa. It originally, to be fair, was started by a Montrealer, but they announced on Twitter that they were, Ottawa-based bagel chain opening first Montreal location, right? And all of a sudden, everybody in Montreal started piling on them, right? So Tourism Montreal wrote Ottawa-based bagel chain in quotes, and then with a bunch of red flags, right? And then you have right?
There's going to be protests, I feel.
Right. This famous DJ, Max Graham, who goes, Vermont-based poutine is next, I guess. Right.
Oh my! I'm still a bagel snob, even though I don't live in Montreal anymore, and I can't even eat the bagels.
Right. Kettleman's is setting themselves up for failure the way that Smokes Poutineery did when they came to Montreal. It's just love. It's so great that Montrealers came to the defense of this and excuse me, what are you doing and what's going on? Much. That is my nachas of the week: is the city of Montreal standing up for its bagels and saying to Ottawa bagels, whoa. Chill out.
Can we go as far as to say is that it was plagiarism? They're trying to plagiarize, it's like a bad replication of the Montreal bagel. Whoa, I tied it all together.
Amazing. That's actually interesting because there's no such thing as plagiarism with regards to recipes. It's a big point of contention when it comes to cookbooks and cookbook authors that you can't copyright a recipe. But plagiarism, clearly you rip somebody off. And I don't know. All the power to them. Go make your bagels. And I'm sure that they are very, very, very good bagels. But you cannot expect anything less than what happened when you go and you're a non-Montreal bagel chain trying to come and break into Montreal for, selling bagels.
Down my street, interestingly enough, there is a store that opened up recently called St. Lawrence Montreal Bagels itself. The guy apparently was originally one of the workers at the old store in Montreal, and he came out to Calgary and opened it up. They are unfortunately not as good, but I wonder if he's plagiarized.
Of course they're not.
But he has the wood fire oven in the back.
Of course they're not.
Yeah. There's something like that in Vancouver too. The guy went and studied at St. Viator. He went and trained and then came back to Vancouver.
Good. And look, I keep kosher strictly, which means that I generally I don't eat St. Viator or Fairmount bagels because they're not certified. I don't think that they're trafe. I don't think there's anything potentially problematic with them. I'll be first to go out there and say that and make sure do not whatever. But I know that whatever bagels I'm having in Montreal, because they're not of those two, are notably going to be even somewhat slightly inferior to what you're getting on St. Viator or at Fairmount.
I'd agree.
And I accept that, and I say, okay. And to be fair, District Bagel, great bagels. Côte Saint Luc Bagels in Montreal, amazing
Bagel West
bagels.
is really good if you're ever in the West Island.
But they're not certified kosher.
Yeah, they are. I'm pretty
are?
sure that they are.
I'll have to check them out. Okay. All right. Thank you for listening to Bonjour Chai for Thursday, October 28th. Our producer is Michael Freeman. Technical production is by Andre Goulet. Our music is by So Called. We are a project of the Jewish Living Lab and are distributed by the CJN Podcast Network. You can listen to all our past episodes on our new page at thecjn.ca/bonjour. And you can subscribe to the podcast and automatically receive all episodes on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. One of the perks of subscribing, actually, is that we generally try and get it out to the subscribers earlier, and it only makes it up to the website usually by Friday morning. So if you like to get that Bonjour Chai goodness piping hot and fresh out of the oven as early as possible, you should definitely subscribe. Please do leave us a comment and a rating on the platform of your choice. And as always, you can email us with comments at bonjour@thecjn.ca. I'm Avi Feingold.
I'm Ilana Zakon.
And I'm David Sklar.